Hello everyone, I'm here today to do my wrap up for February, and I read 11 books in February. I have still 23 books left in my ancient TBR, but I think that's pretty good going, considering I started with like almost 50, and now I at the point in which is almost like 2 books a month will do. However, my Storygraph TBR has grown a lot. I have added a lot of books in there, partly because of prices, partly because I was just browsing on the library app and stuff like that. So that is up to 39 books at the moment, which is still manageable, but yeah, it is a bit higher than what I would like it to be. Then, in terms of the TBR that I set up in January for February, I have read everything, I think, except one book. I did DNF Things Remember, Things Forgotten, just because it's short stories and I was not really interested. I read half of it and I realized I was not retaining anything, so I decided to stop. But in terms of the books that I read, the first one I finished is Yoghurt and Jam by Lena, which is a graphic novel about this woman growing up in Lebanon. Her mother was, I think, German, so they lived with her German mother in Lebanon, and it's more almost about the mother than it is about the daughter. It goes through the reasons why the mother moved to Lebanon. I did find this, I think the art was very interesting. You can see the woman there. It has like very big eyes, slightly unsettling, but very interesting. Yeah, I like the art. I think the story writing, it was very choppy, like it went back and forth many times, and it was a little bit not easy to follow the point of things that she was trying to say. So in that sense, I didn't enjoy it as much as I could have, because it didn't have like a proper, not even a story, but like a point. It felt that the point was a little bit lost in the form of the novel. And so, yeah, I liked it. I didn't love it. One I read is Childhood Youth Dependency by Tove Ditlevsen, and this is actually a compendium of the 3 biography books, the Childhood, Youth and Dependency, that she wrote. And I quite enjoyed this. Well, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but she had a very difficult and abusive growing up, and then she went into the same patterns herself. And so this book kind of looks at how those cycles of abuse happen. She is a poet, so this was very well written in terms of words. But the first book is about her childhood, growing up poor, and kind of how her parents in some ways try controlling her. Youth is about kind of her finding her tribe. And she got married like 4 times or something. So I think Youth would take the first or second marriage as well. And then, the third one is about this abusive marriage that she got into at some point. I think that it was well written, and I think it was very interesting to see how the life in Denmark was at this time, and how the interests were different. But I also found very strange, I think this was published in 1971, I think. And there's a lot of talk about everyone cheating on everybody and everyone getting married and divorced 2 years after. It's really it's not a very stable life, and I don't know if it's because of the particular way in that she grew up, or it's also about the era that she lived in, but that surprised me a lot. So I didn't know that she was going to be so flaky with her decisions. Yeah, that was interesting, for sure. And she also talks about when her children were born and her feelings for them and her lack of feelings for them at some points. I think that's that was also quite well depicted, the conflicting feelings for motherhood. But yeah, overall, I don't know how I feel about this. I think there's some parts of it that I really enjoyed, but some of them not because I think they're bad written. I just think that her life is not kind of the life that I would choose to live, and that there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just like I don't relate to her so much in some of the decisions she makes. She makes some horrible decisions, and I just don't know why. The next one is Edo's Souls by Stella Gaitano, and this is set in South Sudan, and it's a multi-generational story of this mother and this daughter. So the mother is Edo, and she was very strong-willed, and the daughter was like the most useful, nice person. She was always helping everybody, and there is a joke on that because she is called, I think the equivalent in the language would be feces, and she was called like that because her mom lost a lot of babies, and so the tradition there is that for the next baby not to die, they give them a very horrible name so that death doesn't want to come and pick them up. So she always hated her name, but then because she was so nice and helpful, everyone started naming their daughters after her. So there is a lot of girls in this town called Feces, and we follow both of them. I think the daughter more than the mother, but I found the perspective of the mother, or like the story of the mother, a lot more appealing to me. I think she was a very strong, interesting woman. She had a lot of girlfriends and had this like sisterhood with them that was very interesting to read about. But then the daughter was a lot more, I don't know if passive is the word, but just not as interesting to me. So overall, I thought this book was okay. I think it was well written. The story was not that special. Then the next book that I read was The Fawn by Magda Szabo, and this is about an actress, and she was very poor growing up, and so she's still trying to deal with feelings of not being accepted and not belonging to things, and so there is this triangle, because the husband of this actress, he has this woman that he says it's his friend, and he's helping her because he's unstable, but they obviously have a relationship, and so all that does to the feelings of insecurity that this actress has and stuff like that. I think from all I have read from Magda Szabo, this was her weakest, or the one that I liked the least. I think the story was not so interesting. I don't think the normally Magda Szabo's stories have like a hook that you want to follow the story, and this one didn't have that so much. I think it was more just about this one character, and I think the other thing that she does really well is relationships, and I think this book had less of that just because it was more focused in this one person, and so yeah, it's still a good book, but I just enjoyed it less than her other books. Next book I read is The Last Rainforests of Britain by Guy Shrubsole, and this is a description of what a rainforest is and the historical data that shows that Britain used to be full of these rainforests, which we don't normally think about because we normally associate rainforests with things like the Amazon, and of course Britain is very different from the Amazon, but basically rainforest just means a very vegetation heavy area where it rains a lot. So yeah, Britain used to be that. There were a lot more trees and stuff, and at the beginning I thought it was going to be a little bit too Britain center, but after a bit it does go into a more general view of things. Not that it's general, but it like uses Britain as an example rather than just focus on Britain itself. I think it was very interesting. I think that the author did a very good job at tackling the topic, and I also really like there's an endearing tone of this book, about the love of the plants, about also there is a point in which the author shares slight moments of his life, like the moment where his 80-year-old grandma decided to put a Extinction Rebellion sign on her window because she saw what was happening to the forest and she was not happy about it. Things like that, that made this book also very endearing, on top of being very strong scientifically. Then the next book I finished is A System So Magnificent It Is Blinding by Amanda Svenson, and this was a wild ride. So this book is about 3 siblings that are triplets, and their family is very dysfunctional. So when they were born, like the moment they were born, the dad tells to the mom that he has been cheating on her, which was not great. And then you see that, and then you see them as grown-ups, and they have all kind of not lost contact, but fallen away from each other. So there's 2 girls and 1 man, or 2 women and 1 man. The first woman, she has been in psychiatric wards and stuff like that for a while, and she is now living in Berlin with her boyfriend and the daughter of her boyfriend, and trying to figure out being a stepmom or a mom and what that means for her. The other woman is she was a journalist in Stockholm, and she loses her job, and so she randomly decides to go to Easter Island because she knows there is this man that her sister dated, and he is trying to build a community of people that are preparing for the end of the world because of climate change. And she meets him because she knows that her sister suffered a lot from him, and so she wants to see this man, and kind of on a journalist capacity try to document this group of people that are trying to prepare for the end of the world. And then the brother, he's working in London. He has a PhD in neurology or something like that, and he's working in this institute in London that works with different animals and doing different tests about behaviors, and they also make consultations with people that have weird abilities, and nobody really knows what this institute is doing. It's kind of a mystery what they're there for, but he still likes his job, so he's there, and they all kind of have things that connect them to each other, and then at some point the mother reveals this big secret about the family, and that gives them a lot of doubts about each other and themselves, and they have to explore each other and their relationships deeper, and that's kind of what the book follows. It's very unrealistic, it's very wacky. It's everyone seems to be connected to everybody in a way that is not realistic. The coincidences are wild, but it makes it fun, I think. And the only thing I will say is that the ending was very unsatisfying and plain for how wacky this all was. But I enjoyed the experience of reading it for sure. Then the next one I read is Why Fish Don't Exist by Lulu Miller. And this one is about the author, kind of, her dad dies, and so she finds the passion of her dad and is transferred to her, about this scientist David Starr Jordan, who was a taxonomist, I think that's the right word, and he is mapping a wild amount of species in the planet in the 1800s. And so she starts to be fascinated by him and wants to find more, and then she finds more, and it's not great, because what his findings led him to is eugenics, and sterilization of undesirable people and stuff like that. And so it is her grappling with that, but also like the idea that this man also came to, is that fish don't exist, because the term fish is so wide and refers to so many different species of things, and that it doesn't really make sense. There should be more differentiation, and so fish as a concept doesn't really make sense, and we should find a better classification for those kind of animals, that divides them in groups that have more in common with each other. And so it's kind of like the idea that chaos of species and things like that don't always allow for classification, and we have to just deal with the chaos. And I found this okay. I think it was very well written. The sentence level was very good. I just didn't connect to anything that was being discussed. I just don't think I was interested in the topic. It was horrific to read about the sterilization and the eugenics part, but other than that, I was just not super interested in the discussion about the chaos and all of that. I think that is just semantics for me, and I'm just not. I think the concept itself of the things that we know, and that's more important than the specific words that you use for them. So the discussion that this book had didn't appeal to me, but I can see why a lot of people love it, and I can see how well written it is, and why it's so popular. Then I also listened to What the Wild Sea Can Be, The Future of the World's Ocean by Helen Scales, and this is an overview of the life on the ocean, how we are affecting it in many different ways, and what we can do to improve the situation, basically. It was interesting because normally climate change books, or books about nature, do start with just explaining the dynamics of whatever they are describing, and then in the second part they're and this is how we are destroying it. This book went into the destroying part from the beginning. It was all about how we are destroying all the life that lives on Earth, or in the ocean at least, and the initiatives that exist to protect them, and how they work and don't work, and what we can do better to serve this part of our Earth, basically. I did like that it was a lot more centered in that side of things, and I also like that she recognized that there is a certain amount of privilege on being sustainable, basically. Being sustainable takes time, because you have to research the things that you need. Being sustainable takes money, because normally sustainable things are more expensive. And it also takes, if you're going to be vegan, for example, there is a certain privileges in terms of the health, the accessibility of vegan options, and all of that stuff. So there is a lot of privilege on being sustainable, and she does recognize that, which I really appreciated. But she also looks at things a little bit more on the like government level, and how reserves in the ocean should be treated and all that kind of stuff. So it's more about putting pressure on governments to protect the ocean rather than stop eat fish or whatever. So yeah, I like this book. I think it was very well done. I would say it's probably not one that stands out among the majority of the books about climate change and natural destruction that exists at the moment. I think it's a very good example of it, but it's not a wildly new idea or a wildly new topic or anything. But I'm still glad I read it. The next one is Private Revolutions by Yuan, and this one is about 4 women in China, and they were born in the 80s and 90s, and we follow their story. Many of them were born in the countryside, and their parents worked in the city, so they grew up with their grandparents, and then their like ways of getting out of the village and growing as individuals and human beings, and how the Chinese laws make it difficult for a lot of people to do that. I really enjoyed this. I think it was really interesting and I learned a lot of things. I knew that, of course, sweatshops and stuff like that exist in China, but it didn't clock with me that people my age had to go through that, and they made the choice to work in these places, and some of them had ridiculous conditions, like they were working from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. every day for 6-7 days a week, and they were paid absolutely minimum wage. And people did choose to do those things because the alternatives were worse. And hearing them talking about this happening in like 2014, 2015 was just, it was weird. It was kind of, yeah, it felt wrong. But I know, because it felt like the descriptions of the working conditions felt like they were taken out of a Dickens novel, and reading that's happening in 2014, 15, 16 is just crazy. So yeah, even though I knew rationally that this was happening, reading about it in such a personal way, it was very interesting, and it was very eye-opening. One thing that I would say as a criticism maybe is that some of the perspectives blended into each other more than others, because this is not organized by, like, you don't go one woman and then the other and then the other. It's more organized in topics. So the first part addresses like the childhood, and not all of the characters or like the persons in this book appear on all of the chapters. So for example, for childhood we only follow 2 or 3 because they are the ones that had to go through the most hardship in their childhoods. One of the people that we follow, she grew up in the city. She didn't have any problem signing herself up in the city school because she belonged there, whereas the other ones, if they wanted to go to school, they had to go back to their villages because that's how the Chinese system works. But yeah, so one of them grew up in the city with no issues, so we then follow her in childhood, and we pick up with her when she's in university, because her main story was that she became an activist because of the things that she saw around her, but not because she experienced a lot of these things herself. It's organized in sections related to like topics like childhood, growing up, and then their like current situation and where are they kind of going, and it goes all the way until the pandemic or further than the pandemic. So it also follows how the quarantines and closures affected all of these women and their businesses and things like that. And yeah, I did find it very interesting. I think my favorite and the most distinctive voice is Sijue, which she grew up in the countryside with her grandparents, but her parents were relatively well off, and so she was able to go to some sort of college to learn English because she was very interested in English. She couldn't go to like public university because she didn't do well in school because of the way her personality was, but she raised above that and she went to this school, taught herself English, and she eventually opened her own English school. And she also is very focused on teaching practices and parenting practices, which was particularly interesting to me. And yeah, she does criticize how much pressure it is put on Chinese children to perform in school, and how they should be taken a more holistic approach to things, but it's not the case in the majority of places. And that discussion I found very interesting. As I said, one of them was an activist, another one started a community center that tried to help women with things like maternity leave and childcare and stuff like that. So just basically women supporting women, which was really, really nice to see and really nice to read about. So I really, really enjoyed this book. And then the next book I finished was The Chrysalids by Wyndham. I read this for my book club, and this is about a post-apocalyptic world in which the character that we follow lives in a society in which everyone is like ridiculously religious, and the law is that if anyone is born with any sort of deformity, like an extra finger, an extra toe, slightly longer arms than the average, stuff like that, they would just be killed basically. Or banned from society, because everyone has to be made on the image of God. And the protagonist, David, is in principle a normal kid, but he can communicate with his mind. There is a number of children that can do this, and he's one of them, and they can have sort of like telepathy skills, and so at the beginning it's fine because nobody knows, but at some point people start having doubts and like suspicions about these kids, and so they have to run away. And we just follow like their realization that this religious take is very random. Like, why do these people think they're the right ones and this is how people should be, and all of these things is very random. And yeah, it was very interesting. It was very well written. It was very pacey. Like, I read this very fast, and it was very easy to read, which I really appreciated. And I also found that the characters were very endearing, and I wanted to know more about them. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this book. I do think that some of the things are a little bit dated, like the way that women are treated is a bit dated. At some point, David is running away with two girls, and he seems to always be worried that they cannot cope. And these women are very strong-willed, strong women. But he's always like, oh no, I have to protect them, they cannot cope with things. And that kind of language repeats over and over again, so in that sense it's a little bit dated because this was written in 1955. But other than that, I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the story. I think the morals were not subtle, but I didn't mind it. And everyone is kind of a piece of shit in this book, basically. But it was good to read. And then the last book that I read is By the Fire We Carry, by Rebecca Nagle, which is about the struggles of Native American people with keeping their land and their culture, and the difficulties that they have with the American government to recognize their rights, basically. So it is a lot of legal talk about land ownership, about who is to implement the law on these reservations, about nationality and how nationalities should be considered, like should they still be considered American citizens even though the law doesn't apply on the reservations, should they have a different Native American nationality, all of these different things that have been discussed in the past, and all of the things that the law has done to them and the government has done to them in a legal way, and the people that are fighting against it as well, and how little choice sometimes they have. It was very harrowing how they have been treated, and it was horrible. But with that said, it was also sometimes very dense on the legal talk, and it did this thing that American books do sometimes, that they assume that everyone is familiar with the American politicians and American legal system and American legal personalities and stuff like that, which is not necessarily the case, and it kind of pisses me off sometimes. But other than that, I think it was a very important book, and I really glad I read it. So now, in terms of what I am planning to read for March, my March TBR is out of control, so bear with me. Yeah, I'm going to go through the books that I'm planning to attempt in March. So the first thing that I need to read as my challenge is the longest book in my TBR and my oldest book in my TBR. So the oldest book in my TBR is NW by Zadie Smith. And yeah, this follows some people in London, council estates, stuff like that. She often writes about those kind of things. And I have found that Zadie Smith can be a hit or miss thing for me. I normally like it better when she's talking about lower class people. I don't know, I read, was it on Beauty, about these rich professors doing horrible things, and I didn't like that. But for example, Swing Time I really enjoyed. So I'm hoping that this goes more in that direction. And the longest book in my TBR is An African History of Africa by Zeinab Badawi. I have read really and hear very good things about this. That's why I got it, and I am interested in the history of Africa, so I am hoping that this is very good. And I mean, it's very big, but the font is also very big. It's a hardback, which I almost never read, but this time I have the hardback, so let's hope that one is good. The next one I want to read is still not here with me, but is Sister-in-Law, and that is longlisted for the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction. So I decided to read it because it sounded really good, but the paperback is coming out on I think in the 4th or the 6th of March. So yeah, I have pre-ordered the book, and whenever it comes I will be reading that one as well. And then two books that I have chosen for my buzzword challenge thing. So the word challenge was to read a book with thing on the title. It's a difficult one for me. I didn't have anything with a thing in the title in my TBR, so I searched around in my library. I searched for things having thing, everything, something, and I found The Everything War, which is about Amazon. It's a non-fiction about Amazon and the horrible things I do. So I chose that one. I have to still go to the library to pick it up, but that's what I will be reading for that challenge. And then the cover challenge was a book that has books on the cover. And for that I chose reading Lolita in Teheran, which is also from the library. Not all of the covers of this book have books on it, but the like Penguin Classic one has. So even if my library doesn't have that version of it, I'm just going to count it because I didn't find anything else that fitted this prompt, so we're going to go with that. And then the last book that I really need to read is Pale Fire by Vladimir Nabokov. This is the book club pick for our book club, in real life book club for March, so I'm going to be reading this one. I'm not sure about what this is about, but it's supposed to be like weird mixed media experimental kind of writing, so I hope I like it. I love Lolita, so I hope this one is. And then once I finish all of that, my priority is finishing the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation. I have 4 long. I'm reading through the long list, and except from the long list from 2024, I only have 1 book left for 2021, for 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, I have 1 book left, and so I'm working through those books. Hopefully I can read all of them, but I'm not sure if I will manage all of them, but at least some of them. So I am currently reading Abigail by Magda Szabo. I'm about 100 pages in, so I will continue with this in March. For the next year, I have left Not a Novel by Jenny Eppermeck. This is a very short one, so I hope I can manage to put it in. For the next year is Slime by Susan Waldich, which is a non-fiction about gross slimy things, I think, and I'm very excited for this one. And then for 2023, the one I have left is Chinatown by Tuan, which is a Vietnamese book. I'm not sure exactly what it is about, but yeah, these are the books that I am hoping to read, but I don't promise anything. And then I also have a hold from the library for Voltaire Capitalism. Should come out into my library in March. It was due at the end of February in the library, so I should be able to pick that one up as well. So it's a lot of books, but we will see how far I get. Even if I don't read all of these and I read a couple of them, still good going. So yeah, those are my plans for March. Let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought about them in the comments below, and until next video, bye!